Hey, how are you? Coming at you live from my hotel room in Chicago. Well, I'm sure the lighting isn't fantastic, but believe it or not, it's natural lighting. Probably believe it. Anywho, speaking of lighting, I want to talk about lighting this scene. So what we are looking at here is this very abstract, experimental kind of fashion shot, and there's just a couple of clips thrown together here. And this is a shoot that I put together with my friend Landon, and ultimately we just said we want to do weird stuff and cool things and have no idea what to make out of it. So I'm gonna have another video further down the line on how we shot this project, and this is not the final which you are looking at. This is just a series of clips that I had put together just to be able to show you guys this, in a sense, to see the lighting setup, because that is what we are going to be breaking down today. Is this hero frame in this exact setup is what we are going to be looking at, looking into each and every light and how we got the look that we have here and why. So diving in here, I want to start with saying that this was just really impromptu. I just brought lights, I brought gear, and we had no idea what we were going to be shooting. And we went the day before and we were like, well, let's just use the space that we have here, which is this grungy area, and make it look cool and decorate it with RGB lighting and some like fluorescent practical lighting, so on and so forth, adding to this grunge look. So you can see that the majority of the lights here that we've got are these kind of tungstens, these fluorescents, and these pinks. And that's the kind of color palette that we decided to go with here, just because we thought it looked appealing. And I want to start with the first light that we started with here, and this is this practical that you see dead in the background above Shay's head. Shay was the model that we worked with on this project, and above her head you see this kind of fluorescent practical look, and this light here is what started everything. This was the first light that I added into the scene, and I said, hey, let's build something off of this. Now again, this was very impromptu, very creative. We had all the creative freedom to work with in the world, so we didn't have an actual lighting setup or plan or anything. So this may not apply for your particular scenes where you've got to have an exact structure in place, but we didn't have anybody looking over our shoulders and we could really do whatever we wanted. So we threw up this tube light first, and this is an Amaran T4C tube. Now I put this up here just with gaff tape because ideally I would use a metal clip and just stick it onto the metal, but there was no metal there, it was just aluminum. So magnets don't stick to aluminum. Anywho, so we put that up there via gaff tape, and I went into the Sidus link and I used the faulty bulb effect. Now I did that because I wanted to just add to this grunge factor. We decorated the scene all grungy, just threw garbage everywhere really. So I wanted to have a flickering fluorescent light. So I did that with the faulty bulb, and I went into the HSI mode and I just really screwed around. I want to say I went in the range of probably 120 degrees hue at like 25 saturation, just to give this grungy green look. Now moving forward, we've got this fluorescent tube in the background, but obviously there's a handful of more lights that we added in. Now you see that in the middle of this frame, we've kind of got pink, this ambience of pink. So I want to talk about that, how we got this pink look, because one, pink contrasts very nicely with this green color, and we also just wanted to have either pink or red. Originally we wanted to go for, but we just didn't like how it was looking on camera, so then we switched down the line to pink. So to get this pink look, we used an Aperture Nova P300C, and I didn't even use a modifier or anything like that. I just saw that there was a wall there on frame left, so I just put it on a C-stand and punched it into the wall at full output at 100%, just to bounce on how you see the TVs in the background, that kind of safety blanket with that metallic finish. Seeing it on the floor and really in the shadow areas, you're starting to fill with this ambience of pink light. So we've got that tube light in the background in this ambient pink. And then the next light that we wanted to add in here, because we know that we want Shay to be the main focus. We knew that we wanted her exposed nicely and with this kind of white light. So overhead, just directly above her, I used an Amaran F22C, and I had that at 5600 Kelvin at daylight, because my camera was set to daylight as well, 5600. So I knew that that would give me a pure white look. And with the Amaran F22 overhead, I used the diffusion material that's on it, as well as the egg crate, the grid that comes with it, because I wanted to isolate this beam of softened light overhead on just her in this table here. I didn't want it to spread throughout the entire scene and really flood these RGB areas with white light. I just wanted to keep this beam of light isolated yet diffused and soft in this area of her sewing on the table. So now we've added in the tube light, we have that pink light on frame left, and then we have her key light. Now, a couple more lights that I wanted to add here. In this room frame left, in that dark kind of electrical closet, if you will, it was just dark. You had a dark door there, and I wanted to add more depth into the scene, so I took one more T4C tube and stuck it in there, matching that tube in the background above Shay's head. So on this faulty bulb mode, and then for the same color code that I had on the back one. So they're both kind of like flickering fluorescent lights that we just had in the scene there. And you can see it cast on this door, across the floor. You can even see it casting on the sewing machine at some point in time throughout the shots as well. So it just matched up, giving you more depth between the foreground, middle, and into the background by utilizing lights, so on and so forth. So then I was looking at it and I was like, this looks really good, but everything is really soft and pooly. Like there's not a lot of contrast and texture and depth in the scene. And I was like, how can we do this? I want to add one more light, but I don't know where. And that's the fun, but also the difficult part about these really impromptu shoots, is that you run into a lot of troubleshooting. You look at the frame and you're like, yeah, it looks cool, but it doesn't look cool enough. And I really started to overanalyze it, and I was like, well, what could I add? And I was like, what if we just add like one of those really deep amber tungsten like emergency lights that you see in the corners of shops and rooms and offices. So I was like, I don't know what that was. Anyway, so I was like, all right, well, let's take that orange one and stick it over in the corner. And I want it to be hard because I want a hard backlight to create contrast and shadows and depth as it rakes across all of the items that we have put in the foreground throughout the scene. So I took an Aperture 600D, which is a daylight source, and I stuck that on a stand way in the back with just a reflector dish. Now on top of that reflector dish, I added 2 CTO gels. I don't know the strength of which. I think they were just orange RGB gels that I had put over those, some Roscoe ones, just to give it that really deep orange look. And then between that and the haze, just casting through, the TV rack, across some of the decorations that we have on the floor, onto the wall. It just fills in a lot of this shadow area with this amber kind of tungsten emergency light sodium vapor look. And honestly, I really loved the look that it was giving us. And in some of the shots, you can even get this hard light as this little light flare as well, just to add another pop of interest into the background. And you know me with my light flares, I always love to add them. Now, what else do we have here? I think that is all, minus this sideways light that you see just on the floor. And on the floor, we just had this practical light just to add to this grunge of things are thrown everywhere look. And in that light, I added an Aperture B7C bulb just on 2700 Kelvin, or it might have even been 2500 Kelvin, just to really warm up this bulb. And I had that in there very low, just so you can see this glow and this light. And I placed it in a place where you can actually see the reflection in the water on the floor. And to get this water, we actually just took 5-gallon buckets, filled them with water, and just did a wet down that way, just to get more reflections and more light and dimensions throughout the entire scene on the floor as well. So again, this is what we are looking at here. It looks intricate because there's a lot of color going on, there's a lot of shadows, there are a lot of dimensions to this hero frame, but the lighting setup itself wasn't that intricate. We had this key light overhead because of course you need a key light to light your subject, and we knew we wanted that white, so we just had that as a daylight source. And then we wanted to have an in-frame practical with that fluorescent tube, which gave this kind of grungy mood. So we added that, and then noticed that in the foreground we had a lot of darkness in that closet on the left. So we just took that practical and then replicated that into this utility closet. So now we've got those 2 greens there, but to contrast the greens, we wanted this pink, and we knew we wanted either a red or a pink or something really deep in saturation. So we just added the Nova and reflected it there off the wall just to fill up this ambience and these shadows with this really dim pink. And then looking at it, I was like, well, there's still a lot of shadow area. I don't necessarily like where it's going. What is something else? It's missing one thing. And that's where I decided we wanted a hard backlight, because a hard backlight is going to give you contrast. It's going to rake across items in the background, creating long shadows and silhouettes and just a little bit more level of depth, as well as some more color contrast. And then we've got the white to balance everything out in the middle. So yes, there is a lot going on, but it's not the most intricate lighting setup. It's really just finding pools of light and seeing what's lacking and how we can really add more light and where, and not just doing it for no reason, but also having kind of some sort of methodology behind it and asking yourself, why am I adding this light? Oh, we need more shadows, or we need more ambience. let's add some here for that purpose. Now there's one more that I want to talk about. We've also turned this scene of her sewing into a runway because we liked this runway model look in the grunge of everything. So what I wanted to do, I was like, all right, well, in fashion runway, there's often photographers and there's flashing lights and strobes and all of that from the photographers taking the photos of the models walking down the runway. And I was like, well, we're not bringing in 30 photographers here. How can we do it? Like, what would be fitting for this grunge setup to emulate that? And I was like, well, photographers would we're in a grungy area, it doesn't make sense. What if I took some aperture MCs and put them on the paparazzi mode and just scattered them throughout the frame? Now, I only had 3 with me. Again, we didn't really have a plan for this, so I just kind of grabbed an abundance of lights and I said, hey, let's work with what we got. So that's what we did. I would have loved to have like 10 of these MCs just lining the walls in this paparazzi mode, but I only had 3, so I set them all to about 6,000 Kelvin to make them cool, and then set to the paparazzi mode on 100%, and I just slapped them on the walls and on the rack throughout the frame, so when she's walking through, you can see them flashing and flickering, not only on Shay, but you can see them flickering on those TVs and the reflections as well when I was shooting really downrange on this runway shot. So that was just everything the same as we discussed before, but adding in these paparazzi mode aperture MCs just to emulate kind of like a photography strobe simulation, but in this grungy warehouse kind of look and feel. So this was the lighting setup, and again, I want to talk about how we shot this in a future video, and I want to talk about, you know, what went into this, what Landon's vision was, and what he rambled off to me. I want him to do all the explaining because it's a jumbled mess inside of both of our heads, and he did a better job explaining what the vision was that he had, because he really kind of shaped this all and worked from there. And then I want to talk about everything else and just like what went into it, how we did the set design, lens choice, camera stuff, and all of that. So this, I guess you could say, is a 2-part video, this one part being the lighting, and then the rest to follow in a future video. And that's really gonna wrap this all up. So that was a mouthful. I didn't even stop to hesitate or anything. It was a pretty good run, this video. Honestly, it's super cool. I was like, let's just have fun and try things and experiment, and I am thrilled with how well this came out. So anywho, it was great to see you. I will see you in the next video, and cheers.